The forbidden clock of creation, the hidden truth behind the Book of Jubilees. There exists a book, ancient and mysterious, that once held a place of honor among sacred texts but was later banned, buried, and forgotten by most of the world. Its name is the Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis. It tells a story you won't find in the traditional Bible. A story not only of creation, but of time itself, structured, guarded, and divinely sacred. This book, still preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible and found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, reveals a truth so radical, so powerful, that religious authorities felt compelled to erase it from mainstream scripture. What makes it so dangerous? Because the Book of Jubilees doesn't just retell Genesis. It rewrites our understanding of how the universe was created and how time was designed by God Himself to govern both heaven and earth. According to Jubilees, the very first act of creation was not just light, it was order. Time, as we know it, did not evolve randomly. It was formed, day by day, by divine design. A structure meant to keep all of creation in harmony with its creator. The calendar described in Jubilees is unlike the lunar-based system most ancient civilizations used. Instead, it presents a solar calendar consisting of 364 days, precisely divided into 4 equal seasons of 91 days each. That means each season contains exactly 13 weeks. The year is perfect, balanced, and eternally consistent. No leap years. No guesswork. No confusion. This calendar wasn't just practical, it was sacred. The author claims it was revealed to Moses by an angel of the presence, and that it was used by the patriarchs before the law was even given at Sinai. It was the original rhythm of creation, the divine heartbeat of time. In this vision, time is not neutral. It's not just a way to measure change. It is a spiritual force, something to be honored, protected, and kept in alignment with heaven. The Book of Jubilees teaches that the angels were the first beings created, even before the heavens and the earth were fully formed. These angels were assigned roles not only as messengers or warriors, but as keepers of the cosmic clock. They watched over the cycles of time, taught sacred law, and ensured that humanity would follow the holy calendar laid out by God. To keep time properly was to walk in harmony with divine will. To follow the sacred calendar was to remain in covenant with heaven. But the people strayed. Over time, they abandoned the 364-day calendar and adopted the lunar one, a calendar that was easier to observe, but impossible to align consistently with the seasons and Sabbaths. As a result, according to Jubilees, festivals and holy days began to fall on the wrong dates, disrupting the sacred balance and offending the angels who govern time. This was not just a mistake, it was a spiritual crisis. The Book of Jubilees goes as far as to condemn the lunar calendar as the cause of apostasy, lawlessness, and eventual judgment. It warns that without proper alignment to sacred time, humanity becomes disconnected from God's order and falls into confusion. This bold stance directly challenged the religious authorities of the day. The official Jewish priesthood, based in the temple, followed the lunar calendar. By claiming their entire system was flawed and spiritually dangerous, the Book of Jubilees essentially accused them of leading the people astray. This is one of the many reasons why the book was excluded from the official canon. It threatened power structures. It questioned the legitimacy of religious leadership. And it dared to suggest that God's original instructions had been forgotten or deliberately replaced. But the implications go even deeper. By emphasizing the sacredness of time, Jubilees paints a picture of the universe where every moment has meaning. Every day is part of a divine cycle. Every Sabbath, festival, and season aligns with heavenly forces. The calendar isn't just a tool, it's a revelation. This message is not just ancient wisdom. It's revolutionary. In the modern world, time feels chaotic. We chase the clock. We rush from one task to another. We mark our lives by man-made schedules and artificial deadlines. We forget that time was once holy. That it still can be. The Book of Jubilees calls us back to that sacred rhythm. It reminds us that time, like space and matter, is part of creation. It is not a prison but a path. A cycle designed to return us, again and again, to rest, renewal, and spiritual alignment. This is the deeper truth the book offers. And perhaps this is why it was silenced. Because to live by the sacred calendar is to reject the artificial rhythms of empire, industry, and institution. It is to remember that our lives are not measured in hours but in holiness. The Book of Jubilees may be banned, hidden, and nearly forgotten, but its message endures. A call to remember. A call to return. A call to live in time as it was meant to be lived. Not in haste. Not in confusion. But in rhythm with the divine. The divine order of angels, unveiling the celestial hierarchy in the Book of Jubilees. In a world where humanity wrestles with chaos, disorder, and spiritual confusion, the Book of Jubilees offers a radical vision, a world governed not just by divine law, but by divine beings tasked with maintaining the cosmic balance. These are not the angels you were taught about in Sunday school. They are not merely messengers floating gently on clouds or singing in heavenly choirs. In the Book of Jubilees, angels are administrators of time, guardians of law, and enforcers of sacred order. This ancient text, still preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible but rejected by most modern canons, opens a hidden door to a cosmic reality governed by spiritual law and angelic authority. The story it tells is not just about human beings, but about the spiritual infrastructure of the universe, maintained by a hierarchy of heavenly beings. It begins not with humanity, but with the angels of the presence, created on the very first day. The first act of creation, angels before the world. Unlike the Book of Genesis, which focuses on the material formation of the world, the Book of Jubilees shifts the lens upward to the spiritual realm that existed before the physical world took form. In this vision, the first creations of God were not the heavens and the earth, but the angels. These angels were not passive witnesses. They were active participants in the divine plan. The Book of Jubilees introduces two primary orders, the angels of the presence and the angels of sanctification. The angels of the presence dwell in constant nearness to God. They are His most trusted agents, speaking on His behalf, carrying His wisdom, and governing His cosmic will. They are described as deeply involved in human affairs, especially in instructing the patriarchs like Noah, Abraham, and Moses on how to live according to the heavenly law. The angels of sanctification, by contrast, are guardians of purity and sacredness. Their role is to protect the holy rhythms of worship, to ensure that what is sacred remains undefiled, and to maintain the spiritual cleanliness of time, space, and soul. The implication is profound. Before any mountain was formed or star lit in the sky, a spiritual architecture had already been constructed, and that architecture was maintained by angelic forces. Angels and the teaching of law. One of the most surprising revelations in the Book of Jubilees is that the divine law was known long before Moses received it at Mount Sinai. According to this text, the heavenly law, Sabbath observance, dietary purity, marriage regulations, and even sacrificial instructions were not innovations, but restorations of what had already been taught to Adam and passed down through the generations. But who were the teachers? The angels. Jubilees presents a vision of a world where divine law was embedded into the very fabric of reality and taught directly to humans by celestial beings. The patriarchs weren't just wise, they were divinely guided. They knew how to walk in righteousness because they were taught by beings who stood before God Himself. This concept reshapes our understanding of biblical history. It suggests that the fall of humanity was not just about sin, but about forgetting the divine instructions and breaking the cosmic order. It also redefines what it means to return to God. It's not merely a moral awakening, it is a return to angelic instruction, a resynchronization with the divine framework that governs the universe. Angels as timekeepers and cosmic judges. Another unique role the angels play in the Book of Jubilees is their function as timekeepers and judges. They are described as those who keep watch over the calendar, the seasons, and the Sabbaths. When humanity fails to observe sacred times correctly, it is not just a matter of confusion, it is a violation of divine order, and the angels respond accordingly. There is also a constant battle taking place in the spiritual realm between the righteous angels and the rebellious forces that seek to corrupt creation. These forces, led by figures like Mastema, a character often likened to Satan, aim to introduce lawlessness, impurity, and chaos. Jubilees recounts how Mastema persuaded God to test Abraham by commanding him to sacrifice Isaac, how he sought to hinder Moses, and how he has the power to incite sin if not resisted. But his power is not unlimited. He is allowed only a fraction of influence, and even that is regulated by God and opposed by the loyal angels of sanctification. Thus, angels are not merely messengers, they are guardians of balance, resisting corruption and restoring righteousness. Cosmic justice and angelic warfare. The Book of Jubilees does not portray a passive universe. Rather, it paints a vivid picture of ongoing cosmic warfare, not just between humans and their sins, but between angelic forces that shape the destinies of nations, guide prophets, and defend the divine order. This worldview may sound foreign to modern readers, but it's entirely consistent with the apocalyptic literature of the Second Temple period. What sets Jubilees apart is how intimately it ties human actions to the unseen spiritual conflict. To break God's law is not just a moral failure, it is to side, consciously or not, with the forces that war against divine light. To obey is to join the angels in their mission to uphold creation. This is a much higher and more serious calling than mere religious observance. Why this view was silenced? Understanding this, we can begin to grasp why the Book of Jubilees was excluded from most biblical canons. It wasn't just a question of historical accuracy or theological clarity. This book empowers the individual. It reveals a spiritual realm where divine truth is accessible not just through priests or institutions, but through angelic messengers, cosmic laws, and sacred time. It challenges the control of religious authorities by implying that many of their traditions had drifted from the original, heavenly model. And perhaps most dangerously, it illuminates the reality of spiritual warfare, a reality that modern religion has often sanitized or ignored. Rediscovering the angelic order. For those seeking a deeper connection to the divine, the Book of Jubilees offers an invitation to remember the spiritual order that preceded us. To live not only in moral uprightness, but in harmony with divine law and angelic truth. This means restoring the rhythm of sacred time, honoring the laws embedded into creation, listening not to the noise of the world, but to the whispers of eternity, spoken by those who dwell in the presence of God. We are not alone. We never were. From the beginning, humanity has been watched over, instructed, corrected, and protected by divine beings who exist not just in myth, but in reality. The forbidden knowledge of Jubilees is not just that angels exist, but that they have always been here, guiding us home. The fall of the Watchers, how fallen angels corrupted humanity in the Book of Jubilees. Buried within the dusty folds of the Book of Jubilees lies one of the most powerful and controversial narratives in all ancient religious literature. It tells of a time before the flood when the line between heaven and earth was broken, when divine beings crossed forbidden boundaries, and when humanity was plunged into chaos by the very angels meant to protect it. This is the tale of the Watchers. While traces of this story appear in the Book of Genesis and the Book of Enoch, it is the Book of Jubilees that presents it with clarity and cosmic consequence. It is not just a myth of ancient rebellion, it is the origin story of human corruption, spiritual warfare, and the battle between light and darkness that still echoes through history. A world on the edge of chaos. According to Jubilees, the period before the Great Flood was one of unimaginable danger. Humanity had not yet received the full law, but was still expected to live by the guidance given to the patriarchs. However, this fragile balance was shattered when a group of heavenly beings, angels, abandoned their divine stations and descended to the realm of men. They are called the Watchers, a group of angels originally tasked with guarding the earth and guiding mankind. Instead of upholding their divine mission, these beings lusted after human women, took them as wives, and fathered monstrous hybrid offspring known as the Nephilim giants, whose violent nature and insatiable appetites plunged the world into terror. Jubilees describes how these Watchers, once glorious and pure, corrupted both flesh and soul. They taught forbidden knowledge, sorcery, enchantments, the use of metals for warfare, and the manipulation of plants for drugs and poisons. What began as a divine commission turned into spiritual rebellion. The children of angels and women. The Nephilim, born from this unholy union, were not merely oversized humans. They were beings of great strength and wickedness, feared by both humans and heavenly powers. Their appetites were unnatural. They devoured all of the earth's food and then turned to consuming animals, and even humans. These giants became the face of corruption, the embodiment of sin. Their influence spread rapidly, infecting the earth with violence, cannibalism, and lawlessness. The very creation God called good was unraveling, not from human sin alone, but from a celestial invasion that rewrote the spiritual DNA of mankind. The grief of heaven. In Jubilees, God does not respond with indifference. Heaven mourns. The angels of sanctification, those who remained loyal, report the chaos to the Lord, weeping over the destruction of God's design. The Creator is not surprised, but grieved. His justice is ignited. He declares that the watchers must be bound in the depths of the earth, their children destroyed, and the earth cleansed by water, a flood not just of judgment, but of mercy. Unlike in Genesis, where the flood is described more as punishment for general wickedness, the Book of Jubilees portrays it as a targeted response to a cosmic crime, a divine emergency intervention to reset the balance between heaven and earth. The binding of the watchers. One of the most dramatic moments in the narrative comes when God commands the archangel Raphael to bind the watchers in the depths of the earth, a prison where they remain until the day of judgment. These angels, once radiant beings of light, are now chained in darkness, cursed with the knowledge that their rebellion set into motion the unraveling of creation. But even as the watchers are punished, God allows one of them, Mastema, a figure often seen as a prototype for Satan, to retain limited power on earth. His role is not to destroy indiscriminately, but to test, accuse, and act as an instrument of divine discipline. This is not dualism. There is no equal war between good and evil. Rather, it is a portrayal of divine sovereignty so complete that even rebellious angels must serve God's ultimate plan. Noah and the promise of restoration. In the aftermath of the flood, Noah emerges not just as a survivor, but as a recipient of heavenly wisdom. The Book of Jubilees states that God gave Noah a book written by the finger of the angels that contained instructions for righteous living, agricultural cycles, and sacred time. This secret knowledge was not magical but practical and spiritual. It included calendars, moral law, and the proper observance of feasts and Sabbaths, keys to restoring divine order. Noah's mission was not just to repopulate the earth, but to preserve the memory of what had gone wrong and how to live rightly in response. The legacy of the Watchers. The story of the fallen angels does not end with the flood. According to Jubilees, their influence lingers. Demonic spirits, the disembodied souls of the Nephilim, continue to torment humanity, inciting violence, temptation, and confusion. They are invisible, but active. Spiritual warfare is not just metaphor, it is the backdrop of human history. But in the Book of Jubilees, knowledge is power. Those who follow the law, who honor sacred time, who remember the sins of the watchers and seek righteousness, are protected. They walk not alone, but with the angels of sanctification, who dwell among the faithful and intercede for them daily. A forbidden knowledge reclaimed. So why was this story silenced? Because it challenges the simplistic narrative that sin began and ended with human choices. It dares to say that the spiritual realm is not passive, that celestial beings have agency, and that human corruption is part of a deeper cosmic struggle. It also redefines redemption. Salvation is not just about forgiveness. It is about restoration, about reclaiming what was lost in the fall, about returning to the harmony that once existed between heaven and earth. And that restoration, according to the Book of Jubilees, is already unfolding. Through covenant, through sacred time, and through obedience to the divine pattern, humanity can realign itself with God's order. The forbidden knowledge of Jubilees is not dark or dangerous, it is the light of truth once hidden, now rediscovered. We are not the center of the story. We are part of something far greater. A tale of rebellion, justice, mercy, and the return to divine harmony. The eternal covenant, how Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob shaped the sacred story in the Book of Jubilees. When we think of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we often remember them as men of faith, family, and vision. But in the Book of Jubilees, they are far more than historical figures. They are divine partners, chosen to carry the weight of a sacred covenant that stretches beyond their lifetimes. In this ancient and often overlooked text, The patriarchs are not just recipients of God's promises, but guardians of a cosmic order, entrusted with preserving divine law, sacred time, and spiritual truth. The Book of Jubilees tells a richer and more structured version of their story, one where angels walk beside men, where rituals are recorded in heavenly books, and where the covenant is not merely a family promise but a divine constitution binding generations together. Let us walk through this story and explore how Jubilees reframes our understanding of these iconic figures and how the covenant they received still echoes into our time. Abraham, the friend of God and guardian of the law. In Jubilees, Abraham is not just the father of many nations. He is a spiritual reformer, a man who rediscovers the forgotten truths of the ancients and reestablishes the proper worship of the Most High. Unlike Genesis, where Abraham's story unfolds with gaps and symbolic gestures, Jubilees fills in the blanks with spiritual depth. Abraham doesn't simply hear a voice and obey. He studies the stars, contemplates the world, and concludes that idols are lies. It is through divine insight, not blind faith, that he turns away from his father's household and seeks the true Creator. The text even describes a dramatic moment where Abraham destroys his father's idols, an act of spiritual rebellion against false religion, and a first step toward his covenant with the true God. But Abraham's role goes deeper. He is portrayed as a man who understands and teaches the laws of God, even before Sinai. He observes the Sabbath. He offers sacrifices according to divine command. He teaches circumcision, not as a cultural rite, but as a visible sign of an eternal agreement, a mark that separates those who walk in holiness from those who wander in darkness. The covenant God makes with Abraham in Jubilees is not just about land or descendants. It includes a moral, spiritual, and ritual dimension. Abraham becomes the template for obedience, a man whose life models the balance between heavenly law and earthly living. Isaac, the hidden warrior of faith. Isaac often appears as a passive figure in Scripture, submissive at his near sacrifice, quiet in his family affairs. But in Jubilees, he comes alive with purpose and prophetic presence. When Abraham is tested and asked to sacrifice Isaac, it is not merely a moment of obedience, it is a cosmic event, watched by angels and permitted by God only after debate in the heavenly court. The text reveals that Mastema, the chief adversary, similar to Satan, was the one who requested the trial to test Abraham's faith. But something astonishing happens. Isaac agrees to be sacrificed. In this version, Isaac is not a frightened child. He is a willing participant in the divine drama. His trust in God, and in his Father, is so complete that he says, "Let the will of the Most High be done." This detail reframes Isaac as a courageous servant of God, not a passive victim. Later in life, Isaac too follows the covenant. He gives tithes, keeps the festivals, and commands his children to obey the teachings passed down from Abraham. He is a quiet torchbearer, ensuring that the flame of righteousness does not go out, even as the world grows darker. Jacob, the covenant wrestler. Jacob's journey in Jubilees is one of wrestling literally and spiritually. While the book of Genesis presents Jacob as a cunning trickster, Jubilees paints a fuller picture, a man chosen by God before his birth, protected by angels, and destined to carry the covenant forward. Jubilees reveals that Rebekah was told by God while pregnant that the younger son, Jacob, would receive the blessing. This secret knowledge justifies Jacob's actions later in the story, not as deceit, but as fulfilling God's divine will. Jacob's dreams, visions, and angelic encounters are expanded in the text. When he lies on the stone at Bethel, the Book of Jubilees adds that angels ascended and descended not just as a vision but as a sign of a heavenly witness, confirming Jacob's role in the sacred plan. Jacob's covenant is renewed multiple times at Bethel, during his return from Laban's house, and even in Egypt as he blesses his sons. Each time, the language of law, holiness, and inheritance returns. He isn't just passing on wealth, he is transferring spiritual responsibility. He teaches his children to guard the calendar, observe the festivals, keep the Sabbath, and remain separate from the nations who worship idols. In Jubilees, Jacob becomes a prophetic father, preparing his 12 sons not only to lead tribes, but to establish a holy people grounded in divine law. A multi-generational covenant. What makes the Book of Jubilees unique is how it frames the covenant as multi-generational, heavenly sanctioned, and angelically recorded. Every act of obedience, every festival celebrated, every law remembered is written in heavenly books, preserved by the angels of sanctification. The covenant is not simply a one-time event, it is a continuous unfolding, shaped by decisions of the patriarchs and watched by celestial forces. Jubilees also makes it clear, God's promises are conditional. The land, the blessings, the protection all depend on Israel's willingness to uphold the covenant. Disobedience leads to exile, while faithfulness ensures harmony with both heaven and earth. This theological frame adds urgency and depth to the patriarchs' choices. They are not just living for their own time. They are laying the spiritual foundation for all generations to come. Why this story was hidden? So why was this profound telling of the covenant excluded from mainstream canon? Because it presents a vision that decentralizes religious power. It does not require temple sacrifices or priestly intercession to maintain the covenant. Instead, it teaches that anyone like Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob can walk with God if they choose righteousness, observe sacred time, and live in covenantal relationship with the divine. It also challenges institutional control. By portraying the calendar, festivals, and laws as given before Moses, it undermines any claim that such laws were exclusive to the Levitical priesthood. In essence, it gives spiritual authority back to the family, to the household, and to the individual who seeks to follow God with sincerity and knowledge. The legacy of the patriarchs. In the Book of Jubilees, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is not just a family chronicle, it is a blueprint. A guide for restoring what was lost in Eden, for walking in the way of light, and for resisting the forces that seek to destroy spiritual order. Their lives teach us that righteousness is remembered. Heaven is watching. Every generation matters. The covenant is not just history. It is a call, a map, a divine inheritance that must be accepted, guarded, and passed on until the time of full restoration. The sacred rhythm of time, discovering the true meaning of the Sabbath in the Book of Jubilees. There is a moment in every week that transcends time. A sacred pause where the noise of the world is silenced, where creation itself breathes deeply, and that moment is the Sabbath. To many, the Sabbath is a commandment. To others, a tradition. But in the Book of Jubilees, the Sabbath is far more than a day of rest. It is a cosmic principle, woven into the very fabric of the universe from the dawn of creation. It is not only a human duty, it is a divine rhythm observed by angels, sanctified by God, and critical to the harmony of all things. In this ancient text revered by the early Essenes and preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, the Sabbath is presented not merely as a religious observance, but as a covenantal anchor, a sign of identity, a guardian of spiritual alignment, and a bridge between heaven and earth. Let's explore how the Book of Jubilees reframes the Sabbath not as an obligation, but as a gift of divine time. The Sabbath was created before man. In most readings of Genesis, the Sabbath is introduced on the seventh day of creation, after the formation of humanity. But in Jubilees, the emphasis shifts. The Sabbath is not a response to human need, it is a holy act of God, sanctified before Adam took his first breath. According to Jubilees 2:1-33, God created everything in 6 days, and on the seventh, he rested not because he was tired, but because he was establishing a spiritual pattern for all creation to follow. This act of resting was not passive, it was active sanctification. God blessed the seventh day, declared it holy, and appointed it for eternal observance by all who walk in his ways. The text is clear, he created it as a sign, to guard against forgetfulness. The Sabbath was not born from religion. It was not invented by a people group. It is older than any temple, older than any priesthood, older even than humanity itself. It was, and remains, the heartbeat of divine time. Angels observe the Sabbath. One of the most striking revelations in the Book of Jubilees is that the Sabbath is not a human custom alone, it is also kept by the angels in heaven. Jubilees teaches that the angels of the presence and the angels of sanctification, those who dwell near the throne of God, observe the Sabbath exactly as it was given to humanity. This creates a mystical alignment between heaven and earth, where the faithful on earth are literally joining the celestial host in sacred rest. When you keep the Sabbath, according to Jubilees, you are not just obeying a command, you are entering into a spiritual rhythm shared by angels. You step into a higher dimension, participating in the same cycle of worship, reflection, and stillness that sustains heaven itself. This idea elevates the Sabbath far beyond religious tradition. It becomes a portal of spiritual alignment with eternity. The Sabbath is covenant. In Jubilees, the Sabbath is not merely a day, it is a sign of the everlasting covenant between God and His people. Much like circumcision marks the physical body, the Sabbath marks sacred time. It is the seal of divine relationship, a weekly reminder that you are part of something holy, something eternal. The text tells us that the Sabbath was given to Adam and his descendants, and later reaffirmed through Noah, Abraham, and Moses. It was never meant to be a burden. It was intended to protect humanity from the tyranny of endless toil and from the spiritual amnesia that comes from being lost in time. Each Sabbath is a return to Eden, a reminder of God's intention for a world where work does not consume, where rest is not weakness, and where time is not a master but a servant of the soul. Violation of the Sabbath, a cosmic rebellion. But what happens when the Sabbath is ignored? In the Book of Jubilees, violating the Sabbath is not a minor infraction. It is portrayed as a rejection of the divine covenant, a direct assault on the harmony of the universe. The consequences are not only personal, they are cosmic. The text states that those who profane the Sabbath shall be destroyed from among His people. Not because God delights in punishment, but because to break the Sabbath is to unplug from the very source of spiritual alignment. It is to step out of sync with divine rhythm, and chaos follows. In fact, one of the tragedies Jubilees highlights is that in the generations before the flood, humanity abandoned the Sabbath, and with it, the knowledge of sacred time. This forgetfulness opened the door to corruption, violence, and eventual judgment. Even after the flood, as the world began anew, the danger of neglecting the Sabbath remained. That is why God reestablished it with every covenant. It is the divine safeguard against spiritual decay. The Sabbath and the calendar of light. The Book of Jubilees also connects the Sabbath to its broader vision of time, a solar calendar of 364 days, perfectly divided into weeks, seasons, and festivals. Unlike the lunar calendar later adopted by mainstream Judaism, this solar calendar ensured that the Sabbath always fell on the same day, preserving its sanctity without error. Jubilees laments that once the people abandoned this calendar, they lost the ability to properly observe the Sabbaths and the appointed feasts, leading to confusion, misalignment, and spiritual decline. Thus, the Sabbath is not just about a day. It is part of a sacred system of time, orchestrated by heaven and meant to anchor humanity in truth. To restore the Sabbath is to restore the calendar, to return to God's blueprint for living in rhythm with creation. Why the Sabbath was hidden from the world. With such cosmic significance, why has this vision of the Sabbath been lost or ignored? Because it challenges everything. It challenges secular culture, which treats time as a commodity. It challenges religious systems that have distorted the Sabbath through legalism or abandoned it through convenience. And it challenges modern life, where rest is equated with laziness and productivity is the ultimate virtue. The Book of Jubilees dares to say, you were not created to produce endlessly. You were created to pause, to breathe, to remember. You were created to participate in the divine cycle of rest and worship. And that truth is revolutionary. A Sabbath for the soul. In the end, the Sabbath in Jubilees is a gift. A sanctuary in time. A weekly temple that requires no building, only willingness. It is a space where burdens are lifted, identity is restored, and eternity touches the present. In observing the Sabbath, you are not just resting. You are remembering who you are. Not a machine. Not a consumer. Not a cog in the wheel. But a soul. A child of the covenant. A being made in the image of God, called to walk in step with heaven. Conclusion: reclaiming sacred time. The world today is more restless than ever. Screens never sleep. Work never ends. Noise never stops. But the Book of Jubilees calls us back to the origin. Back to the garden. Back to the sacred seventh day. It whispers across centuries. Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. It is the sign between me and you. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen, we'll rediscover not only rest, but rhythm. Not only peace, but presence. The division of the earth, how the Book of Jubilees rewrote the destiny of nations. In the ancient pages of the Book of Jubilees, long before modern maps or political boundaries existed, there was a divine blueprint. It wasn't drawn by kings or empires, but by the hand of God Himself. The earth, in all its vastness, was divided by covenant, and that division carried both spiritual significance and prophetic weight. While the modern reader may see geography as neutral mere landmass shaped by nature, the Book of Jubilees offers a very different view. In its narrative, the earth was divided among the sons of Noah, not randomly, but with heavenly oversight, angelic precision, and divine foresight. This act of division was not just historical, it was moral, prophetic, and covenantal, shaping the fate of every nation that would come afterward. Let us journey through this sacred division and explore how the Jubilees account reveals a world rooted not only in soil and stone, but in justice, law, and spiritual responsibility. The covenant of Noah and the division of the earth. After the great flood, as the waters receded and humanity emerged into a cleansed world, Noah stood not only as a survivor, but as a new Adam, a father of future nations. God made a covenant with him, reaffirming His promises, establishing laws, and setting in motion a sacred distribution of land. According to the Book of Jubilees, Noah gathered his 3 sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth and gave each of them specific regions of the earth, clearly outlined and divided by natural boundaries, mountains, rivers, seas, and deserts. But this wasn't a random land grab. Noah gave these territories under oath, invoking the name of God and the authority of the angels. Each son, and by extension, their descendants, was forbidden from trespassing into the territory of their brothers. To cross those lines was to violate a sacred boundary, to rebel against the divine order. The message was clear: geography was sacred. The land was not just inherited, it was assigned by heaven. The inheritance of the sons of Noah. The Book of Jubilees meticulously records how the earth was portioned. Shem, the firstborn, was granted the middle of the earth, stretching from the Euphrates River, through Mesopotamia and Arabia, down into parts of the east. This territory included what would later become the Holy Land, and it was given with special blessing, as the place where God's presence would one day dwell. Ham received the hot and fertile lands to the south, including Africa and parts of southern Asia. His inheritance was vast, but the text foreshadows coming difficulties due to rebellion among his descendants. Japheth, the 3rd son, was assigned the territories of the North and West Europe and parts of Asia Minor, lands characterized as spacious and cold, but also distant from the center of divine activity. Each division was precise, often marked by seas or rivers, and accompanied by oaths that prohibited intermingling or land grabbing. To modern ears, this may sound tribal or even archaic, but in the context of the Book of Jubilees, it is deeply moral. The division of the earth was an act of divine justice, ensuring that each nation had its portion and its responsibility. Spiritual consequences of land theft. The consequences of violating this land division were severe. The Book of Jubilees warns repeatedly, "Cursed is he who crosses the boundary assigned by Noah." Such a person brings judgment upon himself and his descendants. This is more than ancient territorial law, it is a warning against spiritual colonization. To take what is not yours is to disrupt divine balance. To conquer sacred land is to invite chaos. This has implications far beyond ancient history. It speaks to the moral dimension of empire, migration, and war. It asks, who has the right to rule? And the answer in Jubilees is not the strongest, but the one assigned by God. The text even explains that some of the greatest conflicts in human history, including the Canaanite incursion into Shem's land, were direct violations of this covenant, and thus incurred divine punishment. Why the earth was divided this way? Why did God divide the earth in this particular way? According to Jubilees, geography was not just about environment, it was about destiny. Each son and nation would develop differently, and their land reflected their spiritual path. Shem's land was the center, the most blessed, because it would one day hold Mount Zion, Jerusalem, and the temple. It was from Shem's line that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and ultimately the Messiah would come. Ham's land was fertile and rich, but also filled with challenges. It would produce civilizations like Egypt and Babylon, powerful but often in rebellion against God. Japheth's land was distant and vast, preparing the way for future expansion and diversity, often associated with the Gentile nations. Thus, the land was not just divided, it was designed. It reflected the personalities, prophecies, and paths of the people who would inhabit it. A warning for the future. Jubilees is not content to be a historical document. It speaks prophetically about the future of the nations. The text predicts that in the last days, nations will once again cross forbidden boundaries. They will conquer, oppress, and claim lands that were not theirs. And when they do, God will respond not with silence, but with judgment. The division of the earth is not just a story, it is a test. A test of humility, contentment, and obedience. Will the nations honor the boundaries set by God? Or will they pursue domination, empire, and greed? The book's warning is timeless. Every trespass is seen, every violation recorded, and every injustice will one day be reversed. The fate of the nations. The Book of Jubilees envisions a world where nations are not just political units, but spiritual entities, each with a destiny written in heaven. Their fates are not left to chance, but are shaped by their alignment or rebellion against divine order. This cosmic geography gives meaning to history. It suggests that wars, migrations, and empires are not just events, but reflections of deeper spiritual truths. And it invites every people group to ask, are we walking within our calling? Are we respecting the boundaries given to us? Are we blessing or violating the divine order? For those who align with righteousness, there is blessing. For those who rebel, there is exile. This, too, is part of the covenant. Relevance for today. Why does this ancient story matter in the 21st century? Because we live in a time of globalization, conquest, and identity crisis. Borders are contested. Cultures are clashing. Empires rise and fall. And the world feels increasingly divided. The Book of Jubilees offers a sacred lens through which to view these realities. It reminds us that behind every map is a moral structure, and that peace comes not through power, but through respect for God, for covenant, and for one another. Perhaps, in recovering the wisdom of this ancient division, we may also recover the path to reconciliation. Conclusion: a world measured by justice. In the Book of Jubilees, the earth is not ours to possess. It is God's to assign, and ours to steward. Every river and mountain, every valley and coast belongs not to men, but to the Creator. To live well in this world is to walk humbly in our portion. To honor the land, to bless our neighbors, and to remember that justice begins not with conquest but with covenant. May we learn again to walk within the lines not out of fear, but out of reverence. For in that sacred division lies the secret to peace among nations. Messengers of light and judgment, the role of angels in human history according to the Book of Jubilees. From the earliest stories of Scripture, angels appear as mysterious figures, messengers, protectors, warriors, and witnesses. But nowhere is their role in human history laid out with such clarity and purpose as in the Book of Jubilees. Far from being distant or decorative beings, the angels in Jubilees are portrayed as deeply involved in the unfolding of human destiny, from the creation of the world to the final judgment. In fact, Jubilees offers one of the most complete and structured angelologies in all ancient texts. Angels are not only part of divine communication, they are guardians of the covenant, enforcers of law, recorders of human deeds, and even teachers of divine wisdom. Let us journey through the roles these celestial beings play in the Book of Jubilees, and how their involvement reveals a cosmos saturated in divine order, moral responsibility, and spiritual consequence. Angels as witnesses to creation and covenant. The Book of Jubilees opens with an incredible scene. Moses ascends Mount Sinai, and God speaks to him through the voice of an angel of the presence. This framing tells us something crucial from the start. Divine revelation is often mediated through angels. According to Jubilees, the angels were present during the creation of the world. Before man was made, These heavenly beings were witnesses to the divine act of establishing time, space, and law. In fact, the angels observed the first Sabbath, setting the precedent for all of creation to follow in that rhythm. More than passive observers, the angels are keepers of divine memory. They ensure that the covenant God makes with humans is recorded not only on tablets or scrolls, but in the heavenly books. These celestial archives hold the truth of what was said, done, and promised. Thus, every act of obedience or rebellion is witnessed and remembered. The angels of the presence and the angels of sanctification. Jubilees makes a striking distinction between different classes of angels, most notably the angels of the presence. These are the highest-ranking angels who dwell near the throne of God. They are not just messengers, they carry the authority of God Himself and often speak on His behalf. One of them is tasked with delivering the Book of Jubilees to Moses. The angels of sanctification. These angels are devoted to maintaining holiness. They assist in preserving divine law and ensuring that sacred rituals are upheld both in heaven and on earth. These two orders of angels do more than watch, they participate. They help in creation, observe the Sabbath, and dwell among the righteous. The presence of these angels shows that the divide between heaven and earth is not absolute. Where there is holiness, heaven touches earth. Angels as teachers of wisdom. Unlike other ancient texts that reserve divine instruction for prophets or priests, the Book of Jubilees presents a fascinating model. Angels teach humans directly. It is through angels that Noah receives the knowledge of agriculture, timekeeping, and righteous living after the flood. He is given a heavenly book that outlines how to live in harmony with creation and with God. This transmission of sacred knowledge is not secretive or elitist. It is intended to preserve truth through generations. Later, Abraham is taught by angels how to properly observe the festivals, make sacrifices, and pass on the commandments. Even the calendar, the 364-day solar cycle that governs Jubilee structure, is said to have been revealed by angels. This angelic instruction ensures that righteousness is not dependent on guesswork. Truth is handed down clearly and deliberately, so that no generation is without excuse. Angels as recorders of human deeds. One of the most sobering ideas in the Book of Jubilees is that angels are not only messengers and teachers, they are also scribes of judgment. Every human action, thought, and word is observed and recorded by angels in heavenly books. These records are not forgotten. They form the basis for future judgment, both individual and national. This concept transforms daily life. Every moment becomes meaningful. You are seen. You are remembered. You are responsible. When nations violate boundaries, when people forsake the Sabbath, when sin increases, the angels write it down. And when righteousness is practiced, when covenants are kept, and when truth is defended, the angels rejoice and preserve that honor forever. Angels and the judgment of the watchers. Perhaps the most dramatic angelic action in Jubilees is the binding of the watchers. These fallen angels, originally sent to guide and protect humanity, rebelled by taking human wives and teaching forbidden arts. Their hybrid offspring, the Nephilim, brought violence and chaos to the earth. In response, God sends the archangel Raphael to bind these rebellious watchers in the depths of the earth. This is not mere punishment, it is a containment of spiritual contamination. Through this act, angels are shown not just as agents of mercy and instruction, but also as warriors of divine justice. They ensure that heaven's order is preserved, even when powerful beings betray their purpose. Angels who guard the righteous. In the chaos of history, one might feel small, unnoticed, or helpless. But the Book of Jubilees offers comfort. The righteous are never alone. The angels of sanctification dwell among those who fear God. They are not merely symbolic protectors, they are active companions. They guide, shield, and intercede. When humans live in alignment with divine law, they walk in harmony with heaven itself. This intimate relationship with angels is not reserved for prophets alone. It is the inheritance of all who keep the covenant, honor the Sabbath, and remember the commandments. The angelic role in the end times. Jubilees is not just concerned with the past. It speaks prophetically about what is to come. In the last days, angels will again play a central role. They will separate the righteous from the wicked. They will pour out judgment upon the nations who have violated the covenant. They will restore divine order to a world that has forgotten its creator. The final judgment is not an abstract event. It is personal. It is recorded. And it is administered by those who have been watching all along. This teaching is not meant to instill fear, it is meant to inspire reverence. To know that our lives are part of a much larger drama, one in which angels are both witnesses and fellow workers. A divine partnership. The Book of Jubilees presents a compelling vision. Angels and humans are not enemies, nor are they distant species. We are partners in the same story, each fulfilling our role in the unfolding of divine will. Angels keep heaven's order. Humans carry that order into the earth. Together, we form a bridge between the seen and the unseen. This view challenges modern reductionism. It asks us to take the spiritual world seriously, not as fantasy, but as reality. It reminds us that there is more to life than what we see. Conclusion: a watched and remembered world. In a time when many feel isolated, overlooked, or lost in a chaotic world, the Book of Jubilees offers an ancient hope. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are not unseen. From the first moment of creation to the last breath of history, angels have been there guiding, teaching, recording, protecting. They are not relics of mythology. They are participants in God's plan, and they are still at work today. So the next time you feel small or unnoticed, remember this. Somewhere in heaven, your name is written. Your prayers are heard. And the angels of sanctification walk beside you still. The Sacred Blueprint of Time, exploring the cosmic calendar in the Book of Jubilees. In an age where time is often reduced to numbers, deadlines, and digital clocks, we rarely stop to ask, what is time, really? Is it just a sequence of moments, or could it be something more, something divine, structured by heaven itself? The Book of Jubilees answers this question with a resounding declaration: time is sacred. Time is patterned. Time is a revelation. According to this ancient text, time is not only measurable, it is meaningful, woven into creation by divine design. It is not a human invention, it is a heavenly reality. This vision is at the heart of what scholars call the cosmic calendar of the Book of Jubilees, an intricate, structured, and divinely ordained system of timekeeping based on a 364-day solar calendar. This calendar is not just about dates and festivals, it is about aligning human life with cosmic order, truth, and righteousness. Let us step into this celestial architecture and discover why the calendar in the Book of Jubilees may be one of the most spiritually profound and misunderstood aspects of biblical tradition. Time was created with purpose. Unlike modern views that treat time as neutral or random, Jubilees insists that God created time with intentionality. Days, weeks, months, and years are not mere measurements, they are vessels of divine rhythm. In Jubilees 2:8-10, the text affirms that during the creation week, God not only made the world but also established the division of days and weeks, 6 days of work and a 7th day of rest, as a permanent pattern. In other words, from the very beginning, time was structured to reflect God's nature. To live in harmony with time is to live in harmony with heaven. The 364-day solar calendar. At the heart of Jubilees timekeeping is a 364-day calendar made up of exactly 52 weeks, evenly divided into 4 seasons of 13 weeks each. This system is deeply symmetrical and avoids the irregularities of lunar months or leap years. Here's a breakdown of the structure. 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Each season, 13 weeks, 91 days. Total, 364 days, 7-day weeks x 52. This calendar starts each year on the same weekday, Wednesday, the day the sun and moon were created. For the authors of Jubilees, this was not coincidence, it was cosmic theology. The sun governs time, not the moon. This stands in contrast to the lunar calendar used in later Judaism, which required frequent adjustments and intercalary months. The Book of Jubilees sees such calendars as corruptions of divine order. Time is a moral issue. Why does the calendar matter so much? According to Jubilees, getting time wrong is not just an error, it is a sin. In Jubilees 6:34-38, we are warned that departing from the correct calendar leads to the violation of festivals, Sabbaths, and sacred times. When the calendar is corrupted, so too is the worship of God. This is a bold claim. It suggests that timekeeping is not just scientific, it's spiritual. A faulty calendar leads to forgotten Sabbaths, misplaced offerings, and ultimately, the loss of covenantal identity. This concern was not abstract. The text blames the use of incorrect calendars for the decline of Israel's spiritual life. Misaligned time becomes a gateway to misaligned hearts. The role of angels in the cosmic calendar. The calendar of Jubilees is not man-made, it is revealed by angels. In the narrative, angels explain the divisions of time to Noah after the flood. They reveal the dates of festivals, the cycles of weeks and years, and the signs of the seasons. They ensure that divine time is passed down through righteous generations. This angelic role reinforces the sacred nature of time. Time is not a human invention, it is heaven's gift, delivered through heavenly messengers. Just as angels record human deeds, they also preserve the structure of sacred time. And for those who walk in covenant, observing the calendar becomes a way of walking with angels. Festivals as anchors in time. One of the primary functions of the cosmic calendar is to preserve the sacred festivals. These include Passover and unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles. In Jubilees, these feasts are more than commemorations, they are cosmic appointments, reflections of heavenly realities. Each festival is linked to covenantal events in history: Abraham's covenant, Jacob's vow, Noah's thanksgiving, and is intended to be celebrated on precise dates, year after year. Getting these dates wrong is not a small matter. It means missing a divine appointment. The festivals are portals of remembrance, moments when heaven and earth align. The danger of the lunar calendar. Jubilees is deeply critical of the lunar calendar, which had begun to gain popularity in post-exilic Jewish circles. The text claims that this lunar system will cause people to forget the new moons, seasons, Sabbaths, and entire law of God. The lunar system, with its fluctuating months and unpredictable leap years, is portrayed as a distortion of divine order. Those who follow it, Jubilees warns, will gradually fall away from truth. This may reflect historical tension. The calendar in Jubilees likely represents the view of the Qumran community, Essenes, who broke away from the temple authorities in Jerusalem over disputes, including disagreements about the calendar. For them, returning to the 364-day calendar was not just a reform, it was a restoration of the true way. Time and covenant identity. In Jubilees, keeping the correct calendar is a sign of faithfulness to the covenant. It distinguishes the righteous from the corrupt. It protects memory, ensures obedience, and sustains identity. Every Sabbath kept, every festival remembered, every season honored reinforces the link between God and His people. Time becomes not just a cycle, it becomes a sacred story, told week after week, year after year. To forget the calendar is to forget the covenant. But to remember it is to step into the rhythm of heaven. The prophetic function of time. The calendar is not only about past events, it is also prophetic. Jubilees predicts that in the last days, the true calendar will be restored. The righteous will once again align their lives with the original rhythm of creation. This restoration is not just practical, it is redemptive. Timekeeping becomes an act of faith, a declaration that God is still the Lord of time. When this happens, the text tells us, truth will flourish, justice will reign, and the light of heaven will fill the earth. Conclusion: living in sacred time. The Book of Jubilees presents time as a divine architecture crafted by the Creator, maintained by angels, and entrusted to the faithful. To live in alignment with that time is to live in harmony with the will of God. This is a radical departure from modern timekeeping. It invites us to see time not as a burden, but as a gift. Not as a prison, but as a pathway to divine encounter. Every sunrise is a call to remember. Every Sabbath is a doorway to Eden. Every festival is a song of covenant renewal. In a world where time rushes by, where days are consumed by noise and distraction, the Book of Jubilees whispers a sacred invitation. Come back to the calendar of heaven. return to the rhythm of the Creator. Live not just by time, but in time. Sacred, purposeful, eternal. The fall of the Watchers and the rise of human corruption, the forbidden history of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees, often dubbed the Little Genesis, offers a retelling of biblical history through a celestial lens, one that highlights events unseen in Genesis itself. One of the most haunting and pivotal narratives in Jubilees is the tale of the Watchers, a group of angels who descended to earth, broke divine law, and set into motion a legacy of corruption, violence, and suffering. This story, deeply rooted in ancient Jewish cosmology, isn't just a myth about angels mating with humans. It is a tale about power without discipline, knowledge without humility, and desire without restraint. The Watchers became a symbol of what happens when divine beings, or even humans, step outside their God-given boundaries. Let us explore the layers of this narrative, its origins, its theological meaning, and its implications for how we understand sin, suffering, and divine justice. Who were the Watchers? The Watchers were a class of angels, originally created by God to watch over humanity and guide them in righteousness. According to Jubilees and its parallel in 1 Enoch, they were part of heaven's hierarchy, beings of immense power, wisdom, and purpose. But instead of remaining faithful to their assignment, the Watchers looked upon the daughters of men and lusted after them. In their rebellion, they made a pact. 100 of them, including their leader Semjaza, agreed to descend to earth and take human wives. This decision was not only a personal betrayal, it was a cosmic crime, an act of defiance against the divine order that bound heaven and earth. Forbidden unions and hybrid offspring. When the Watchers took wives from among humanity, they produced offspring known as the Nephilim, giant beings of immense size, strength, and cruelty. These hybrids are portrayed as violent, consuming the resources of the earth, and ultimately devouring mankind. Their very existence defied the structure of creation. They were not human, not angelic, but something in between, a corruption of God's design. As their population grew, so did the despair of the human race. The Nephilim became a symbol of power unmoored from wisdom, of strength without compassion, and ultimately, of destruction without redemption. The forbidden knowledge. Perhaps more dangerous than their physical violence was the forbidden knowledge the Watchers brought with them. Each of them taught mankind secrets that had been reserved for heaven. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cutting, sorcery and drugs. Armoros taught spellbreaking. Barakel taught astrology. Azazel revealed the secrets of weapon making, jewelry, and vanity. Others taught signs of the stars, moon, clouds, and spirits. This knowledge accelerated human sin, introducing sorcery, warfare, seduction, and deception. The world became not only violent but spiritually perverse. According to Jubilees, this was the root of many of the evils that would plague the earth, not just physical wickedness, but spiritual pollution. What began as curiosity became corruption. Divine judgment, the binding of the Watchers. God does not remain silent in the face of this rebellion. In response to the outcry of humanity and the pollution of creation, God commands the archangels Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel to act. Raphael is instructed to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the desert, covering him with darkness. There he will remain until the final judgment. Gabriel is sent to destroy the Nephilim and incite them to kill each other in a massive war. Michael is told to bind the remaining Watchers and imprison them in the depths of the earth for 70 generations. This divine action is both a cleansing and a warning. It shows that even angels are not above the law of God. No power, no matter how great, can escape judgment. The legacy of the Watchers. Even after the Watchers are bound and the Nephilim destroyed, their influence lingers. Jubilees teaches that the spirits of the Nephilim do not die. Instead, they become evil spirits that roam the earth, tormenting mankind. These are the unclean spirits, the demons of later Jewish and Christian thought. These spirits are hostile, deceitful, and violent. They promote idolatry, possession, and destruction. And because they are not fully divine or human, they are cut off from redemption. Thus, the sin of the Watchers lives on not only in history but in the spiritual atmosphere of the world. It is a corruption embedded into the very fabric of human existence. Why did the Book of Jubilees emphasize this story? In the canonical Genesis account, the tale of the Nephilim is cryptic, only a few verses, Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4. But in Jubilees, the story is expanded, detailed, and deeply moral. Because Jubilees is not just recording history, it is offering an interpretive lens for understanding human suffering and sin. It explains why violence exploded in the pre-flood world, why sorcery, vanity, and war exist, why spiritual warfare is real, why judgment is necessary. The story of the Watchers becomes a theological framework, a cosmic diagnosis of humanity's illness. It says, evil has a source, a history, and a future judgment. Lessons for today. Though ancient, the fall of the Watchers still speaks powerfully today. It warns of the dangers of unchecked desire even among the wise and powerful. It exposes the risk of knowledge divorced from virtue. It reminds us that spiritual rebellion has real-world consequences. And it calls us to humility before the divine order. In an age obsessed with power, innovation, and self-exaltation, the Watcher's story stands as a tragic mirror showing what happens when we try to become gods without wisdom, without reverence, and without restraint. Redemption in the midst of ruin. Despite the darkness, Jubilees also offers a glimpse of hope. After the Watchers are punished and the Nephilim destroyed, Noah is given divine instruction on how to cleanse the earth. He is taught prayers, rituals, and laws that will preserve righteousness. A new beginning is possible, but only through alignment with God's will. It is in this context that the law, the calendar, and the festivals are revealed. These become tools of resistance against corruption, ways to remember, resist, and realign with heaven. Thus, while the Watchers symbolize destruction, Noah becomes a symbol of restoration. Conclusion, a cosmic warning and a spiritual call. The fall of the Watchers in the Book of Jubilees is more than a myth. It is a moral parable, a cosmic drama, and a spiritual reality. It invites us to consider: what powers are influencing our world today? Are we learning from divine wisdom or pursuing forbidden knowledge? Are we walking within our limits or reaching for what we should not touch? The Watchers remind us that not all knowledge is good, not all spirits are friendly, and not all rebellion is liberating. But more importantly, they remind us that God sees, judges, and restores. That even in the face of corruption, righteousness can be preserved, and those who choose humility can find hope. In the end, Jubilees gives us both a warning and a promise. Evil may rise, but it will fall. Darkness may spread, but it will be judged. And those who cling to God's light will endure. Why the Book of Jubilees was rejected: power, politics, and lost prophecy. The Book of Jubilees, once cherished by ancient communities and preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls, has long stood outside the canon of most modern Bibles. Despite its spiritual depth, prophetic warnings, and expanded retelling of Genesis and Exodus, Jubilees was ultimately excluded from the Jewish and Christian mainstream. Why? The rejection of Jubilees cannot be explained by theology alone. The story behind its exclusion is one of religious politics, power struggles, and the desire to control sacred memory. One key reason for its rejection lies in its bold stance on the calendar. Jubilees insists on a 364-day solar calendar structured and perfect, without the irregularities of the lunar calendar adopted by the Jerusalem priesthood. For the authors of Jubilees, time was sacred and cosmic. To corrupt the calendar was to corrupt the covenant itself. This put Jubilees in direct conflict with the ruling religious authorities, who had aligned themselves with Babylonian and Hellenistic influences. The priests who dominated the temple calendar were not eager to promote a text that denounced their system. As a result, Jubilees was labeled heretical not because of falsehoods, but because of its political threat to institutional power. Second, Jubilees presents a strong angelology and cosmic worldview, including detailed accounts of the Watchers, spiritual warfare, and heavenly records. These narratives were embraced by apocalyptic groups like the Essenes, but were suppressed by later Rabbinic Judaism and early Christian bishops who sought to distance themselves from speculative or mystical teachings. Moreover, Jubilees defends a strict interpretation of the law, tying obedience to sacred time, festivals, purity, and Sabbath observance. As Christian doctrine shifted toward grace over law, texts like Jubilees, which reinforced Torah observance, became unwelcome. To embrace Jubilees would be to question the emerging theological framework of early church orthodoxy. Finally, the prophetic nature of Jubilees, its warnings about corruption in the priesthood, its apocalyptic vision, and its portrayal of covenant betrayal made it dangerous. Books that critique the powerful are often silenced. Jubilees dared to expose the internal decay of religious institutions and to proclaim a future restoration of truth. That made it a threat. Despite its rejection, the Book of Jubilees survives not only in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon but in the hearts of modern readers seeking a deeper understanding of biblical time, justice, and divine memory. Its exclusion tells us as much about the gatekeepers of Scripture as it does about the text itself. Jubilees was not lost because it lacked truth. It was rejected because truth, in the wrong hands, can be dangerous.